no!
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the beautiful Carlsbad Foundation building in Channel 23. The Faces of Carlsbad. We're sponsored by Intrepid Potash, and we really appreciate all the help we get from all of these wonderful people. This is a program where we interview people that you might know, people that you might never have met before, people that you'd like to meet. And if you enjoy seeing this program on Channel 23, you're going to meet some very nice people. And we're very pleased today to have a very nice person that I've worked with for the last couple of hours, you might say. She and I are both involved with the police department in Carlsbad, and I'm referring to Mrs. Judith Nelson, but her real name, I have to give her real name because if her husband finds out I missed his name, he's going to get very angry with me. Mrs. Kenneth Nelson. Judith,
hi, Paul.
Welcome to the show. Anyway, I have to kid, every time I'm talking about Ken, I have to kid him, and he's always kidding me about something. So, anyway, this is a program where we're going to find out a little bit about you, your background, go back as far as you want to, where your ancestors came from, if you'd like to bring that up. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing because sometimes we find out that some of the people came from the same country that Mr. Lutman came from. It always makes him so happy. He always gets a smile on his face. You know, that makes him feel good. But anyway, and then we're going to bring it up to your early days in Carlsbad and where you and Ken finally met, and we'll go from there and have fun with it.
Okay.
So let's go back, way back in the history of the
Back when the earth was still cooling.
That's right. The earth was still cooling.
Well, I was born in a little town in northern Iowa of 900 people.
And what was the name of the town?
Buffalo Center, Iowa.
Buffalo Center.
And have 5 brothers and sisters, and it was a small little town where you really had the village raise you. If you did something wrong, your parents knew about it before you got home. So you pretty much walked the straight and narrow.
And I bet the winters were cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What did you do in the winter in Buffalo?
Well, it's funny because back then you would just put on your winter clothes and go out and play. We didn't have all the fancy gizmos that people do now. So you'd be outside building a fort or having snowball fights, or you'd be ice skating, or later on we had a lot of snowmobiles, and so we'd snowmobile. And lots of times if the weather was too bad, the farm kids couldn't make it in to school unless they came in on a tractor or a snowmobile. And so sometimes the farm kids wouldn't come into school, but the town kids would go to school.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Now, how many did you have a one-room schoolhouse like some of these small towns?
No, but we had a unique 3-story building. And you started out in kindergarten in the basement. Mm-hmm. And by the time you were a senior in high school, you were on the 3rd floor.
Oh my gosh.
So it was, and my father had graduated from that same high school. In fact, my father and all 3 of my brothers wore the same number jersey and played the same position on the football team.
Is that right?
So we have a picture of the 4 of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was a very peaceful, quiet town to grow up in.
Where did your mother and father, where did their ancestors come from?
My mother's family came over from Ireland,
mm-hmm.
and my father's family came over from Germany. And my mother was a nurse, and my father was a John Deere salesman. And she had left Des Moines, Iowa when she graduated from nursing school, mm-hmm. and took a job in this little town that had a hospital at the time. And she met my father when he was a volunteer firefighter, and he had gotten burned at one of the fires, and so they met there. He was 45 and she was 32 when they got married.
Well, this is funny because she lived in Des Moines and ended up in Buffalo Center.
Yes.
Population of Des Moines, what, 150,
mm-hmm.
close to 200,000 people, to 750.
900.
900. My mother lived in Cleveland, Ohio, population then around 700,000 or 800,000. And when she met my husband, my father, and married him, he brought her to Sterling, Ohio, population 1,200. So it looks like it's related in a certain way. Everybody, the women ended up in small towns after living in a big city.
Well, you know, I had a bet with my best friend in senior year in high school as to how long it would take for a rumor to go through that town. And so in study hall, I said in kind of a stage whisper to her, my father took a transfer. We're moving to Elmore, Minnesota. And that's all I said, and that was about 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, that night at 6 o'clock, we were all sitting down for supper when my father's brother, Uncle Phil, came barreling through the back door, hadn't even knocked, and he said, how come I have to hear at the pool hall that my brother is moving? And I said, I won the bet. And my dad said, I don't know what the bet was, but you're grounded for 2 weeks. So, but I was right. It would take less than 24 hours.
Oh, that is funny. And fathers, when we were growing up, they were a lot tougher than they are today, in many cases. I know, because you were grounded for 2 weeks. I didn't get grounded too often, but I would get a good whaling on the seat of my pants.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, one of the first houses we lived in, the 6 of us kids were so glad when we moved from that house. There was a weeping willow tree in the backyard, and if you misbehaved, you had to go pick your own switch. So we were so glad when we moved from that house to a house that did not have a weeping willow tree.
Oh, that sounds like Anne of Green Gables' story, you know, Prince Edward Island. Oh, my gosh. So anyway, your parents met in Iowa. And you were born in that small town?
Yeah, all 6 of us were born in that little town.
Now, what happened now? Where have your brothers, how many brothers did you have?
I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And out of the 6 of us, 4 of us are retired. We're all old enough to be retired. My one brother was a principal of a high school, and he was a football coach at a college for a while.
Oh, where was this at?
That was back in Iowa. I have a sister that's just a year older than me, and she retired from Aetna Insurance a couple years ago. She lives in Minneapolis. And I have a sister that just retired last month. She was the city clerk for a town that was smaller than my hometown in Sheffield, Iowa, for 30 years. So she retired. And then our 2 baby brothers aren't quite old enough to retire yet. One lives in Wichita Falls, in Texas, and the other one lives just outside Kansas City, Kansas. And he is a theater teacher at a college. He's a professor.
My gosh, what a family, huh? So anyway, I got a kick out of the fact that one of your sisters, it's not cold enough in Iowa, she had to move to Minnesota, where it's even colder.
Yes, that's true.
And then we complain sometimes down here how cold it is, and it's unbelievable.
Well, you know, I think once you get acclimated to the weather here, the wonderful weather, when the sun isn't shining or it's a little chilly, then you start complaining. And I just, our son still lives in Minneapolis, and he says to me, Mom, how can you stand the heat down there? And I say, we never have to shovel it.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. Now, where did you and Ken meet?
The first time we met, we were in junior college in his hometown, which was 60 miles from my hometown, Mason City.
Wait, Mason City?
Mason City, Iowa.
Yeah,
the show The Music Man. River City is what Mason City used to be called.
That's right. I listened to, when I was a kid growing up in Ohio, I would turn on my radio and pick up Detroit, WLW, WXYZ, and listen to the old radio shows. Then I would go down to WWL, Loyola University of the South in New Orleans. And one of my favorite places was KXEL, I think it was, Waterloo and Cedar Falls, Iowa.
Yes.
I listened to them because that was the farthest west station I could get, and it was a good one.
Oh, wow.
So I was very close to Iowa every night. My dad would let me listen to the radio because he didn't like to hear all the crazy music I would put on. So he said, you can listen to the radio stations, but that's it.
Oh.
So Yeah, I think it was WXEL or KXEL, Waterloo, Iowa. Anyway, those were the days.
Yes, those were. And the six of us all had to put ourselves through college.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at a Green Giant canning factory every summer.
Wow.
From 7 at night till 7 in the morning, 7 days a week for 6 weeks. But I'd make enough for books and tuition for a year.
In what city was that?
Blue Earth, Minnesota.
With Minnesota.
Now, to this day, I cannot eat Green Giant corner peas.
Is that right? You had enough of that when you were working there, huh?
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
But putting ourselves through college, we really thought twice before we'd cut a class or just squeak by with a C. It was our money we would be wasting instead of our parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daddy told all of us he would co-sign a loan our senior year of college, but until then we were on our own.
That's fantastic. So anyway, Ken met you and you got
And
married?
I was engaged to someone else.
Oh, you were?
When Ken met me in junior college. And he kept asking me out, and I kept saying, I'm engaged. And he said, I don't care. And I said, well, I do. So I wouldn't go out with him. And then a year later, I was no longer engaged, and I was at a four-year school in Minnesota, Mankato, Minnesota.
Mankato State. Yeah.
And my roommate said when the doorbell rang on our apartment, she said, would you go let my date in? I'm not quite ready. And so I went over and opened the door, and there was Ken. And he said, I'm here to pick up Jeannie. Do I have the right place? And I said, yes. He said, well, I thought you were getting married last year. And I said, well, so did I, but I didn't. And he said, well, I'll take Jeannie out tonight, but I want to go out with you tomorrow night. And I wouldn't go out with him. And so about three or 4 weeks later, after he's hounded me all over campus, we went out. And after our first date, he walked me to the door, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and said, someday I'm going to marry you. And we just celebrated 42 years.
You just celebrated 42 years. Isn't that fantastic? Well, he's a smooth talker. And he's a very sharp man. He's been president of our COPS organization and for a long time, and he did such a good job. But while we're on that, Judith, let's talk a little bit about the COPS. Okay. For those people who don't know what it is, fill us in. Okay.
We know people that say there's nothing to do in town surely aren't looking, because we are so busy now. I don't think we'd have time to work. But there is a Citizens Police Academy that's offered a couple times a year, and Jason Griffin is the officer in charge of that. And both Ken and I went to that. And the people that have graduated from that group had said they'd like to continue to support the cops in some ways. So they formed a nonprofit, and they called it COPS, which is Citizens Offering Police Support. And we do some real interesting things with them. We're helping them upgrade their shooting range. Like this morning, you and I did some role plays for them for certain scenarios. One thing I was surprised to find out is there's no money in the city budget for their coffee breaks, things like that, and so that's one of the things we do is we give them a monthly allowance to purchase coffee and tea and cups and things, so when they're working those long hours or filling out those paper blizzards of reports, they can have a cup of coffee and just kind of refocus on what they need to do. So we do some fundraisers, and we also assist them when an officer is retiring to help purchase a retirement gift. Yeah. And we also help with different activities in the community that they would like some citizens helping with. You know, this is a nice community where you have a good relationship with the police department.
Well, the members of the COPS organization, they've done such a nice job, and the leadership that Ken, he's now, his time ran out, so he has
immediate past president.
Yeah, immediate past president, but he did such a terrific job of running it. He really knows how to run things. I can understand why he said, you might be going out with such and such tonight, I might be going out with such and such tonight, but I'm going to see you tomorrow. I thought that sounds like Ken.
Well, I would say of our 42 years, 40 of them he's made me laugh.
Oh, he's got a good sense of humor.
Yes, he does. That was one of the first things that drew me to him.
Yeah.
And he had a long career with the phone company, with the Bell system.
Oh.
He was director of corporate security.
Mm-hmm.
And so he worked a lot with the FBI and the Secret Service on wiretap and computer fraud and investigating employees. And
wow.
So, yeah. And yeah, it was interesting when he would come home and he'd ask the kids if they'd done something. They knew right away they better fess up to it because he was used to interrogating people. So he just said it's much easier if you tell the truth. Then you don't have to remember what you said.
How many family members did you have between when you got married? How many children did you have?
Oh, we have two.
Mm-hmm.
Our son Jeffrey, he is in his late 30s and he's in Minneapolis, and he has our grand dog.
Your grand dog?
Yeah, our grand dog. And we're hoping to get him to move down here. He's a sound recording engineer, but he also works with McAfee Computer Security.
Mm-hmm.
And then our daughter, Jennifer, she and her husband, Brian, and their 3 kids, our 3 grandkids, live here. So, yeah, we just had the 2 kids. I had said when we got married I wanted 10. And Ken said, I can share you with 2. So that's what we did.
Oh, that's funny. So anyway, what do you do in your spare time?
Well, not only do I volunteer with COPS,
Mm-hmm.
the first year we were here, and we will have been here 4 years next week. The first year we were here.
Let me stop you right there. Now, Ken came down here for what business? Somebody brought this up the other day, and I thought, I don't know.
No, we had retired, and let's see, we were living in Albuquerque,
Okay.
and then we moved to Minneapolis, then we moved to Denver. This is before we retired. Then we moved to Salt Lake, then we moved to Seattle.
Wow.
And then we moved back to Denver. And Ken was ready to retire.
And he was working
I
for...
wasn't. He was with the Bell system.
The Bell system.
And I wasn't quite ready to retire. So we moved to Springfield, Missouri, where I was executive director for American Red Cross. And Ken was a house husband for a couple years. Well, the winters there were just too cold. And so we decided we wanted to move back to New Mexico.
Yeah.
It really... it's just always felt like home to us.
Yeah.
And a former neighbor from Albuquerque said, I'm in Carlsbad now, why don't you come down and stay with us for a couple weeks and just look around? And so we came down and looked around, and we went back to Missouri and put our house on the market and thought, if it sells, this is meant to be, and if it doesn't sell within a year, it's not meant to be. Well, it sold in just a couple months.
Oh, wow.
And so then we came out here and got serious about looking at houses, and found a little house on Eddy that we just love. I was tired of the big 5-bedroom homes, and so we have a little house on Eddy.
Yes, and I've had the honor of being in there with the little
Yes.
dog.
Yeah, Hannah Banana.
Hannah Banana. I love that little dog. She's friendly.
Yeah, she's we should have named her Misbehavin', is what we should have named her.
Well, that's par for the course for most of our pets.
Yeah. But anyway, I do COPS. I was a volunteer at the Battered Family Shelter when we first moved here. Been in Rotary. I'd been in Rotary for years, and so I joined the club here.
Yeah.
Currently, I'm with Assistance League, and I'm also on Nana's Fire and Safety School Board, and I'm on the SPRC, which is Staff Parish Relations Council at Church.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, every place we've lived, both Ken and I have really gotten involved in the community. We, our very first move, I remember I was kind of homesick, and I called my mother, and she said, life will be so easy if you bloom where you're planted. And so that's what we do. We bloom where we're planted.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, did he play a musical instrument of some sort?
He played a guitar for a while, and he was a sound man in a band when we were in college. And he sings in the choir at church.
Well, somebody brought that up the other day and said, is this the same Ken Nelson I know? That he played some kind of musical instrument? I said, well, I don't know.
No, I think it was probably the Ken Nelson that passed, maybe.
Could be.
Right after we moved here.
Yeah.
But,
So we never got to see your Ken Nelson on television playing the guitar.
No, which is probably a good thing.
You think so?
Yeah.
I thought-
You know, and you'd ask what else we do. Every year for Christmas, we give each other season tickets to the Little Theater and to the concert series.
Well,
And that's what we
nice.
give to each other for Christmas, and then we can just focus on gifts for the grandkids.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, there is so much to do in this town.
Yeah, this is the thing that really gets me. Why do they say there isn't anything to do in Carlsbad? Because there is something to do. There's always something to do.
That's right.
If you're just looking for it, you don't even have to look for it.
I know, I know.
Now, how do you make all of these meetings that you have? I'm sure every month you've got quite a few meetings to attend.
Yes, it was real hard for me to go from a Palm Pilot, an electronic one, to a paper calendar. After having a Palm Pilot and a secretary to tell me where to go every day and keep things done. So we have a family calendar in the laundry room that we put events down that the two of us are going to attend, and then we each have our separate calendars.
Well, you recently, both of you, attended a Border Patrol seminar or something.
Yes, that was so interesting. We had graduated from the Citizens Police Academy, and then we noticed in the paper that they were having a Citizens Border Patrol Academy. Most interesting. I found out things I didn't know. I didn't realize that Border Patrol has to speak fluent Spanish and know international law.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no international law. So it was a beautiful facility, a great program, and I think they offer this class maybe twice a year, and
Where did they hold it?
right out at Flexi.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so we had to have a background check and bring 2 forms of ID and sign in each time and be escorted around, and it was just really interesting to find out about what they look for in a Border Patrol person. And I asked them why they put it in Artesia. And they said because we needed them to be in the type of environment that they would be in when they're actually working, which would be the arid desert and out where there aren't a lot of people or a lot of activities and things to do. So that's why they put it there.
Now, does that also give you the right to ride with one of the Border Patrols as they do here in our citizens?
If you wish to, if you wish to. I know I was real involved with Leadership Albuquerque and Leadership Minneapolis and Leadership Springfield. And we always had ride-alongs with the police officers. And it really shows you the true side of what a shift is like. And that their main goal is to keep the citizens safe and to come home safe at the end of the day.
And unless you're riding with them, you don't know what's going. You can make any comment you want about our police, but unless you've ridden with them, you'll never know the true story.
That's true. That's true.
And we've been through that. So you go to all these meetings. I'll bet the dog's happy to see you when you get home.
Well, actually, the dog's happier to see Ken. Hannah Banana, I'm the disciplinarian, so Hannah Banana likes Ken much better.
Oh, that's let's not tell him that because he'll just get a big head about that. You know that, Judith.
Well, I said I would like to take her to obedience school, and he said, no, I just want a dog that makes me laugh and loves me. And I said, well, as long as she behaves for me, okay. So every so often, it's almost like when the kids were little and I'd come home at the end of the day or he'd come home at the end of the day and you'd be tired and you'd say, it's your turn.
Oh, yes.
Every so often when Hannah's driving him crazy, he'll say, "Mom, it's your turn."
Oh, that's funny. Well, do you do any reading?
Yes, I love to read Janet Ivanovich. I love all of hers. I just and I like Clive Cussler as well. But I mainly read for pleasure, not real intense reading. I usually read in the evening, and so I
Yeah.
want something to wind down with, not something that's going to get me all nervous and not be able to sleep.
Now, the first, what was the name of the first author again?
Janet Ivanovich.
Ivanovich. She's a mystery writer, isn't she?
She writes about a bail bondswoman who is very inept, and
Yeah.
and how some other folks help her out, and it's comedy, and it's also about dealing with people with drug problems, everything else. So I read a lot of her things, but I think the thing that I love to read the most is I have a book about this big and about that thick, and it's bedtime stories that Grandma tells.
Oh.
And we have our grandkids over one at a time to spend the night. And when it's bedtime, they can get that book out, and they pick
boy.
out the stories that I read to them. And they're old enough now that sometimes they can pick out some of the words, and so they'll tell me the story. So I just wanted to pass that on to kids of how important it is to read.
I think so many families forget that today. I think so
Yes.
many kids are missing out on the fact that, I can remember in particular when I was in the 4th grade, I went to the library, public library by myself, and I got a book on the family Johnsons who explored Africa. And I couldn't stop reading when I got home. I just had to read it. And I loved reading, and even to this day, I love so many different authors. M.C. Beaton, who writes about Inspector Hamish Macbeth up in Scotland, and you name it, and I love to read it. And I'm reading now, I'm going through a 4-volume history of World War I.
Oh my!
And that's quite a project. And it's for kids who don't want to read. I just don't understand that anymore. I must be off on the wrong track. I know things have changed, but for goodness sakes, not reading.
Well, my youngest grandson just turned 7, and he is so excited when he can recognize a word. And I think lots of times kids lose that excitement.
Yeah.
Because they are entertained. They don't entertain themselves.
Yeah.
They expect somebody to entertain them. My mother said years ago, she said, if you 6 will take a book and read and enjoy reading, you'll never feel lonely. And it's true. You don't have to be entertained all the time. You can read.
No. Well, now we've got all those computer games that are taking over everything. And I heard just recently that the kids growing up today don't even know how to write cursive writing anymore, and that nobody's writing letters anymore. Everything's on the internet. And I thought to myself, I'm kind of sad to see that happen, but I'm glad I'm not involved in it.
Well, I went to a local store, and I asked them if they had an address book. And they said, we don't sell computers. And I said, no, an address book. And the young gentleman behind the counter said, well, what do you mean? I said, it's a book, and you write down the name and the address and the phone number. And he goes, why would you want one of those? He said, I would just put it on my iPad or on my smartphone. And I said, I guess that just dates me.
Well, it dates me too.
Uh-huh.
But talking to somebody like that, that's like talking to somebody out in space.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they don't know, they have no idea what we're doing in
Yeah.
life.
Well, he wanted to help me, but
Yeah.
he didn't have a clue what an address book was. And
Oh,
so
that's
I
so
thought, well, I guess I'm a little out of date. But that's okay. I found my address book, and I'm happy.
Good, good. Well, I'm going to say something, Judith. When Ken gets to see this, particular program featuring you, I know what he's going to say to me. He's going to say, she's very lovely, wasn't she? And I'm going to say, yes. Why wasn't I on there? Because I didn't want you on. That's why I can't. We'll get some revenge on.
I think you just tell him that he's next.
Oh, okay, we can do that.
He has some interesting stories too, and it'll be interesting to see if he remembers our 42 years the way I do.
And comparing notes will trick him.
Yes.
We'll trick.
Yes.
Well, Judith, I want to thank you for being our guest today. It's been a real pleasure, and I appreciate the fact that you said yes when I asked if you would like to be interviewed by me. You said yes, I would. What are we going to talk about? Don't worry, I've got it all figured out, I'd said.
Yes.
That worried you all night long, didn't it?
Well, I just needed to be prepared.
Yeah.
I've done so many interviews, I didn't know where the focus was going to
Yeah.
be, so.
Well, I hope you felt comfortable.
Very comfortable.
Oh, good. Well, listen, thanks a million.
Thank you for asking me.
And on behalf of Channel 23, ladies and gentlemen, we want to wish you all, well, Intrepid Potash and a beautiful foundation. All three of us want to say, well, no, and Judith too. Goodbye and good luck. Well, anyway.